identities. One is as the night chair in political reporting, so I'm trying to create better reporters for political news. And then I teach news literacy, which is to try to teach people to understand what my good journalists are doing for them. So, let's see what we have here. I consider everything about news literacy and political reporting, journalism in general, to be democracy in action. I use that phrase for everything, so you see it throughout. Now, to get us started, there's some reminders about why we should teach news literacy. This song, and I tell the students that it tells them two things. One, what the course is about, and my relative age. Now, here is what our challenge is in using elections in teaching news literacy. Now, you have to understand elections are the reason to teach news literacy, but anytime you are trying to use the elections, you're going to run up against all of the problems that make this course essential. This was a wonderful Washington Post story during the presidential election that we could have written ourselves, and I will send it to Dean to share with everybody because it talks about what the partisan bias in voters is all about and what it's creating in that fragmented world out there for consumers who do all those things that we talk about, selective, affirmation, and this story was just fantastic. And I love this. This was, did you write this, Dean? I mean, it's all about the silo. So, what we are going to talk about is this. Whoops. I don't need CNN anymore. And that's what happens. Everybody's getting James's or their friends' Twitter feed, which is more about the affirmation and selectivity of their information. That's what we in news literacy are trying to fight against. So when you go into teaching news literacy, you're going to find, if you use the elections, that it is a real test of news literacy because it makes the students have to know all those early things, all the information neighborhoods. If they don't know this difference between opinion and news, they're never going to really be informed citizens and make informed choices. They fight this, which I'm sure you know, and anytime you start using election stories in your class, all of the students are going to come to those stories and to that class with their own audience bias. Now, here's an example of the kinds of things that you can show them, and it brings out a lot of the problems for citizens in the information that they're getting.
The life you want to live. The peace of mind you deserve. Reforma, the Obama-Pelosi prescription for building a government takeover of healthcare. Anxiety and stress disappear. Reforma. Recommended by more lobbyists than any other healthcare reform. No worries, no concerns. Consult your congressman about Reforma before the August recess. Reforma. The side effects include bureaucratic waste and delay. Not recommended if you like your own doctor, want to keep your own doctor, or want to avoid the government prescribing your medical treatments. Not recommended for people who actually need medical care. The government can deny your health care based on patient age. Cost to taxpayers may vary and is more than you can possibly imagine. You should not support President Obama's Reforma if you're worried about the $1.6 trillion cost or the $219 billion deficit. Call your congressman or senator immediately if you're concerned by any or all of these side effects.
When I use this in class, well, first of all, we know that most people nowadays get most of their political information from ads. And when I show this in class and have the students go through this, many of them, about half the class, don't register it, despite it saying in big print there, paid for by, that's an advertisement. In some of the versions of that, it'll say, call Congressman Dan Maffei and tell him not to do so-and-so. Well, they're targeting Democrats because it's a Republican ad. And the students don't understand that nuance and that subtlety either. So that becomes another layer of discussion about the information that they're getting, what kind of verification and independence they should be looking for. And you can get these ads off YouTube like crazy. So they're wonderful at that. You're also going to have to deal with that worst of all possible things, that four-letter word bias and its audience bias. I had the college Republicans in my class one year, and no matter what came up, he was convinced. I think at the end of the class, I finally had him convinced a little bit that we weren't all out from the liberal media. Then one year I had a student who was from the college Democrats, and the exact opposite. Now, my ideal class would be to get both of them together so that they can then dispute their points of view, but so far that hasn't happened. This is the challenge in trying to get through this, because nothing triggers it like politics and elections. So there are some ways to challenge bias. I particularly like to have them read these controversial stories and then do something really sneaky, which is I change the logos. I tell them that that Fox News story is actually a New York Times story. I tell them that that New York Times story is a Fox News. Blows their minds. They always get it wrong because they're triggered by that cue of what's the news organization. And sometimes I'll just simply hide the sources altogether so that they can't use that. They have to independently think about the information on its own, though they're going to know that it's coming from a vetted professional news organization. Now, the depressing part to me is that they sometimes don't have these sources themselves, or they read blogs and they don't care whether it's telling the truth. That was eye-opening to me, that they didn't care. Now, you're adapting, bless you, news literacy, this wonderful thing, which makes that same point, that people are often cued by the source. They have come to believe that about what the source is and what it's doing and its bias. So here are some of tools for challenging bias, for using in teaching news literacy around the elections. I have my political reporting class actually sometimes do fact checks of statements from politicians or from commercials. So we have several of those that are really terrific these days. PolitiFact is marvelous. All of these are good. FactCheck.org was the grandfather from Brooks Jackson. And we've got the Fact Checker of Washington Post, and many newspapers do this. However, beware, as soon as you bring in the fact-checking sites, you're going to find, where is it? You're going to get lambasted by the right and the left, saying that the fact checkers are biased. This is almost like a vicious circle that you can't get out of, except you just have to keep asking for evidence. So that's where we are. Those are the challenges and the benefits and the beauty. And this is the reminder.